So in my previous video, I did reflect on the question of whether the PhD is worth it. I explained why it's usually, in fact, not worth it. I also explained why I feel that I wish I never did my PhD. So feel free to watch it if you're generally thinking about different options. But here in this video, I want to be a little bit more specific about one thing that I want you to do now, today, or in the next couple of days or weeks, but definitely prior to applying for your PhD, prior to making that decision to pursue your PhD. And this one thing is just to understand very well, first to answer your question, to answer that question sort of internally, and then to just follow with a couple of subsequent steps. Understand what it is exactly that you're planning to achieve afterwards. What it is exactly that you're planning to do professionally. Simple as that. So what exact position you're planning to apply for once you're done with your PhD. And I don't want you to be vague. I don't want you to think it's an academic career, or I don't want you to think, well, something in academia, something in the university, or something outside of university, or doing some sort of data analysis. So definitely not this. That's not what I meant. That in fact represents or reflects how I was thinking about my career. And many people share this experience. So it's nowhere near detailed enough. I want you to know exactly what it is that you want to do. In fact, I want you to look for that job today. Look and try to browse through the different job advertisements. Find that job that you're looking for. So you have to know exactly, because this will happen eventually. It's much better to waste that time now, so a few days maybe, or a few hours, or a few days, or a week now than after you're done with your PhD, because trust me, it will be much more stressful at that point. The stakes will be much higher. You really feel like you feel plenty of pressure to get that job, and there is no going back at that point. There is going back now at this point. So I want you to look for a specific job, specific position. If it's a university job, I want you to look for it and look for a lecture in XYZ, exact position, just so you know exactly what it is. Then I want you to see what is the demand, how many such positions there are. Maybe sacrifice a little bit more time, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just to see how many new advertisements, how many new positions are being advertised. And that's important as well, because as I mentioned in that other video, and as you can easily find if you look into any sort of statistics, the demand compared to the number of graduates is of course very low. So the number of graduates is always way higher than the number of available positions. So if there is only one such job advertised every 3 or 4 months, then you just have to think whether it's worth it or whether you're prepared to take that risk. Same about locations. So of course, is that job in your area? If it's advertised somewhere in the whole Europe or Asia or somewhere in different countries, are you ready to apply for for positions in different countries? Are you allowed to work in these countries? So like I said, just imagine that you're applying for that job today and see what it is, and try to understand as much as possible about that job. And on a very similar note, and this refers back to what I was talking about in that previous video that I strongly advise you to watch, I want you to also understand what exact skills and qualifications they are looking for in that job. So that's kind of a relevant thing. But again, as I explained in the other video, I made this mistake and I made plenty of assumptions in the past, just basically not thinking this whole thing through well enough. So kind of thinking it will be all right, so I'll have that qualification and it will give me the job. But you have to understand what exactly it is that they want. Quite often they don't even want the PhD. In fact they avoid people with PhD. So is it even necessary to do a PhD, or maybe is it more important to have an industry experience that you can get without having a PhD? And that situation is of course much quicker, easier, less money. So a win-win situation. Get a master's, do some get some industry experience, maybe do some internships and get a job. So you have to understand all these things. And again, for that you have to have clarity about this exact position. When I finished my PhD, once I knew already I don't want to stay in academia, I wasted plenty of time looking for research assistant positions, because I didn't know that there are other terms out there, not necessarily research associate or assistant, which are very academic positions. So it took me a while, for example, to understand that a position of a researcher, research consultant, and there are many other words to describe that position. And once I finally got there and I understood what I'm looking for, I started to find these job advertisements and understand what it is that they're looking for. One of the things I realized, for example, is that they rarely advertise for a PhD graduate. So I didn't even necessarily have to have that qualification. Additionally, doing such research early will also help you, even if you end up getting that PhD or studying for that PhD. It will simply help you understand what exactly you're supposed to study. So what you want to study to get that job. Again, there are many PhD areas which are kind of tricky later to get a job, essentially, unless you're staying in academia and you're lecturing in that specific area. Otherwise, there are many areas that are kind of difficult. So in general, many social sciences are kind of vague. So sometimes it's better to understand exactly what it is, or even to understand by looking at these jobs again, because they're very specific at if they do require certain qualification, academic qualification, they quite often specify what it is. So bachelor's in XYZ or a master's degree in this. So it helps to look through these positions, because then you understand even the wording and the terminology and what exactly you need to apply for. So again, you don't end up doing a PhD in something that hardly gives you any opportunity, or at least opportunities that are relevant to what you're actually hoping to do in your life. On top of that, of course, in that whole research into the jobs, you would understand what sort of money we're talking about. You understand whether these are remote or remote positions, or you have to be on site. So all these things that, as I said, coming from my experience now, I know that all these considerations are something that eventually you have to make. So all these things are something you eventually have to consider. Can I actually move to this other city or country? Do I want to move? Do I have a family? Can I afford to move? So all these things you have to start planning early. I remember finding quite late towards my PhD, finding out that it's very unlikely that you'll get a PhD, you'll get an academic position in a place where you live. At that point, I didn't really feel like moving anymore. So I had moved a lot before that, and I felt like I like it here. So I was here in Scotland. And I was a little bit disappointed to hear that, and I panicked a little bit. But that was my supervisor telling me that most likely you won't get a job in this area where you live. You have to be prepared to travel to wherever there is a job in academia. So another thing to consider, you just have to do your research properly. And that's everything. I don't want to make it too long. Hopefully it was a useful advice. Do your research. And like I said, imagine that you're applying for that position. Find that position, find all these positions, monitor over time, see how many of these positions are being advertised, what they're looking for, and then start planning. And then think about it and think about whether you want to have that PhD and what kind of PhD you want to have, if the answer to that first question was yes. So I do hope it was helpful. Please like the video if it was, share it with others just to help them find it on YouTube. And if you're not yet, consider becoming one of my subscribers.